Good morning, afternoon, or evening, everybody, and welcome to Pangolin, the conservation podcast. The show dedicated to exploring and amplifying the world's underappreciated conservation stories. The stories that inspire me, and I hope will inspire you too. I'm your host, Jack Baker, and today I'm joined by Tash Hatcher, the founder and artist behind Hatchling Makes, an animal-focused online stationery store which donates a portion of its profits to conservation charities. She's here to talk about her incredible artwork, her journey into the world of conservation, and how anyone with a passion can be a conservationist. Not just the sciencey minds, artists, actors, authors, podcasters, anyone can be involved. We also talk about why she chooses to focus her artwork on the oddballs of the animal kingdom, her favourite Australian animals, and Big Stompy Birds. Fans of secretary birds, emus, cassowaries and moas, get ready, this one is for you. Now, without further ado, let's get started. And welcome back to the show. I am now joined by Tash Hatcher, an animal artist who some of you may know better as Hatchling Makes. She is all over Instagram. That's where I found you and follow you and do all these things. She has her own shop where she sells pins and all sorts of kind of accessories and knick-knack. I'm holding a pen and I can't think of the word stationery and all sorts of things to support conservation charities. And so she's here today to tell us all about her work and how, as someone who supports conservation in a different way, how anyone can be involved in conservation. Anyone who's got a passion can use that for the good of conservation. So thank you so much for joining me today, Tash.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here.
Thank you. It's great to have you on. And yes, it's nice to I feel like sometimes when you see people on Instagram and these things, you get to know them in a way through the art and the posts that they put up. But it'll be nice to actually get to know you through a chat as well. So
Yes,
thanks so much.
exactly. Meeting somebody and actually talking to them feels so different than actually just knowing them through their social media. So this is so nice because I followed you for a while as well, and I've listened to your podcast before. And so, it's a great way to actually finally meet you.
Yes. I'm more than just the 140 characters that we put on Twitter or whatever it is we work out. So yeah, that's fantastic. I guess we're kind of slightly familiar with each other, but for listeners, I think my first question I always like to ask is could you introduce yourself to them? What should they know about you to get us started?
Great. So I'm Tash, and I'm a self-taught animal artist. I've been running my small business, which is Hatchling Makes, since 2017. So just celebrated 5 years, which is amazing. And since 2018, I have been fundraising for wildlife conservation through my business. So I donate 10% of all my sales, both online and in person. And that's basically me in a nutshell. I'm a lifelong animal lover. I've loved animals genuinely, I think, all my life. I used to drag my family to the zoo all the time as a child. And I still do. Whenever my husband and I go on holiday, if there's a zoo nearby, he knows that, one day is going to be dedicated at the zoo or the aquarium or whatever animal attraction there's going to be. And I think a lot of that's down to the fact that my parents and my mum's family, who live in Australia, really encouraged that love of animals and love of learning in me from as soon as I could walk, as soon as I could talk. So, yeah, lifelong animal lover, animal botherer, as my friend Victoria calls them.
I think that is exactly the same as me. That's like when I was young, I think my mum brought it upon herself because she like got all the memberships from the zoo when we were really young and was like, well, just take them there in the buggy to like show them around. And then as we grew up, it kind of turned from her using it as a way to like relax me and take me out and teach me things to me dragging her around. So
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. And I think sometimes my parents, like as I got older, because obviously I don't live in Australia, and so whenever we used to go down, we always it's a rule now in my family that if you take me to Australia and if you take me to see family, we will go to Taronga Zoo and we will go to the Sea Life Sydney Aquarium. And I remember one particular holiday, and I think we were only there for a couple of weeks. We were sort of flying through and just dropped in to visit family. And I think we went to the zoo twice and we went to the aquarium 3 times. And I think by the end of it, my parents were like, please no more.
You're having to buy annual memberships for a 2-day trip to justify the price of tickets. That's the
Exactly. Exactly.
That's fantastic. And where is it? Like, you've now got me, because I also run a zoo review podcast. I now have to ask, what's your like local zoo? What's your favorite local zoo that's near you now? I need to know.
Oh, gosh. Actually, I've just recently been to the Battersea Children's Zoo for the
Hmm.
first time, which was so lovely and actually much, much bigger than it appears to be on any of their social media and websites.
Hmm.
And it had some of the most bizarre animals, like animals that you wouldn't have expected to see in a children's zoo. You kind of think
Hmm.
children's zoo and you think like chickens and, goats and, horses and stuff to pet. And I walked in and the first thing I saw were wallabies. And I was like, oh, okay. We're starting off strong, and you round the corner and there's like a 9-banded armadillo. And I was like, oh, so that's fantastic. A really, really great zoo. And I love Chester Zoo.
Hmm.
Such a special zoo. And I know that you've just recently done like a rezoo episode on that. But I think that's fantastic. Such a great zoo. And I love London Zoo, the classic.
Hmm.
I think they do such amazing work as well. And I mean, it's like asking me to pick a favorite child to pick a favorite.
Yeah, I'm the same. Whenever people ask me, you'll get a different answer depending on the day, depending on the time of day, depending on the mood I'm in, depending on what animal I've just seen on social media, depending on whatever it is. It'll be, yeah. So
Exactly.
yes, I'm planning on coming back down to Chester later this year. I'm very excited. But if we're down that way, I might have to just nip by Battersea Children's Zoo and have a look.
Battersea Children's
Um,
Zoo.
interesting.
Really, really great. I mean, but if I had to choose my favorite zoo of all time, it has to be Taronga Zoo in Sydney, Australia. It is absolutely my most favorite zoo in the world. They do, again, incredible work, and it's
Mhm.
giant and massive. And if you let me stay there, I would happily stay there for a 2-week holiday if I could, you know?
That's yeah. This is my thing. Is like when I go to a new one, especially where I'm like, I need to spend time every little bit. It becomes a problem because you get around the first like section and you're like, oh no, it's lunchtime now, and I've only seen 3 animals. Like, yes.
I've only been to one exhibit. What's going on?
Where did that time go? And then all your friends and family around about you like, you've wasted all that time because you wouldn't move when we asked you to. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
that's perfect. And I think that's before we get too off track. I feel like this is a whole other episode. This is not what I intended on asking, but it's a good icebreaker question. I feel like you like
Absolutely.
yeah, and you brought them up, so I'm gonna blame like anyone who brings up zoos around me. It's their fault because they know I'm gonna ask. They should know I'm gonna ask. No, that was a fantastic little interesting segue. But you mentioned in your introduction what we're kind of here to talk a little bit more about is Hatchling Makes and your art and the website and everything you do there as well. And you gave it a bit of an introduction there with kind of you talked about how kind of you started in 2017.
Yeah.
I was listening 2017,
You were.
and all that sort of you were self-taught, and I wondered how do you go about kind of if you're self-taught, how do you go about starting something like that? Where does the confidence come from to think this is how I want to support conservation? This is I'm going to set up this shop. Where does that all come from? Where does that idea?
Oh gosh, it was so I didn't set out to start off an online store at all.
Hmm.
What happened was I left my previous career in theater, which I had been doing for 12 years, and I kind of went, well, what am I going to do next? And I had been self-employed in theater before, so I sort of knew the freelance lifestyle and how that worked. And so I kind of went, well, I wonder if I could make it on my own. And originally I was thinking it was around Christmas time that I left my last job, and I thought, oh, I'll make candles because it was that kind of Christmassy, everyone loves candles at Christmas.
Hmm.
And that didn't work out. There's a lot more candle making than I had ever anticipated possible. And I started drawing, and it's just something, drawing is one of those things where, and all artists say it, and I always think, gosh, it's such a cliche when you hear it, but drawing's just something I've done all my life.
Hmm.
And actually, when I was very, very young, when I was properly a child and sort of in kindergarten and drawing horses and things like that, I used to draw my horses totally different to how all the other kids drew horses. So how kids normally draw like really square, blocky shapes, I would be doing like really curved legs and sort of faces and things like that. And my teacher at the time said to my mother, "Oh, you want to encourage this in her because she
Hmm.
has the makings to be an artist." And I had no idea, I don't remember that ever happening, but
Hmm.
somewhere between the ages of 6 to 31, I finally got onto that track that my teacher from all those years ago
Hmm.
finally said that I might be good at. And I started off the small business. I actually started off just sharing my art online.
Yeah.
And I had a couple of people ask me if I was going to be selling some pieces. So I looked into opening an Etsy store. And I did. And I sold, I think, at the time I was doing embroidery.
Hmm.
So it was very different. My shop's gone through very, very different reiterations through the years. And I made a couple of sales on my first day, and I kind of went, well, I could do this. This is something that I could actually do. And like I said, I'm totally self-taught. I'm not a business person. I'm not an illustrator by, I've not got the diploma or anything that says I went to art school, but I know I know a little bit about animals, and I can draw them a little bit, and
Hmm.
it brings me a little bit of joy, and I think it brings a lot of people a little bit of joy. So
Hmm.
that's what
Yeah.
I decided to do.
And in the grand scheme. Like, I suppose at that point you could have chosen to draw or create anything. What made you want to do animals? What was it that was it? This, I suppose, this love that you've always had, and these two things all just mushing together and going, "This is what I'm going to do." Is
I
that?
think that's kind of it. Like whenever I used to draw, anyways, I always used to draw animals. I always used to draw
Mhm.
like little bunnies, or animals have always been part of my life in some way.
Mhm.
Even at my wedding, I folded 1,001 origami cranes, which is for my wedding. Yeah, that was the look that my husband gave me when I said that I was going to be doing it. They've always been. I always kind of feel like animals have been there at like important points in my life, and
Mhm.
um, they're just something that I sort of default to because I love them so
Mhm.
much. And drawing a little robin on scraps of paper, and I used to do that when I was behind the tills in the theater. I used to just scribble out little animals on scraps of till roll and leave them there for the person on the next shift to find.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's really like. Oh, I can imagine now. They're going to sell those till rolls now. That's what it'll be. They'll have saved them and go, "Oh, she's getting whatever she's getting for pin badges. I'm going to sell this now. It's clearly high quality goods."
I imagine they've all been thrown away by now. But
Oh, that's fantastic. And I suppose for the listeners, it might be helpful. I was thinking about this while you were chatting there, like to describe because the way I would describe it, looking at it from an outsider's perspective, would be kind of something like like it's accurate to the animal, but it's cartoonish in a way that's like charming, but not so cartoonish that you can't tell what it is. It's like
yeah,
it's an accurate cartoony interpretation of an animal. How would you describe your style of
I think that's
art?
pretty accurate, to be honest. I try very hard to make the animals look like the animals. I
Mhm.
think that's really important. I think that's really important for my audience, particularly because, and I know you want to touch on this a little bit later, but particularly because I draw a lot of unusual and slightly more obscure animals. I want to make sure they
Mhm.
look like the actual animal, so that when people
Mhm.
go on to go and try and find them, if they go and internet search them later, they're not trying to compare my image to something that looks, totally different and has,
Mhm.
scales and, tusks in different places or things like that. But I take a lot of my inspiration from, I'm a big cartoon lover. I love that kind of graphical style.
Mhm.
And so I take a lot of that kind of inspiration from things like The Simpsons and Futurama and that kind of like very blocky color.
Mhm.
And it's, again, that's just something that I uh, really sort of enjoy. And my style has evolved drastically over the years. And it's just kind of like settled now into this like a little bit cartoony, and it appeals a lot to kids, which I quite like, because I love being
Mhm.
able to tell kids and parents about new animals that they might not have discovered yet, and
Mhm.
sort of encourage that love of learning for the next generation as well.
Mhm. That's yes, and it's not so cartoonish that it would only appeal to kids. It's fallen right in that really good niche where like I feel like anyone can look at it, and the bright colors and the blockiness and things. It's like it's very like visually aesthetically pleasing to the eye of
Yeah.
like I just it's this is my as part of my degree during my undergrad I did a module in aesthetics, so sometimes I
Oh,
feel like I can talk about aesthetics but really I don't know anything I'm talking about, but from personal looking at it I find it very aesthetically pleasing and like
oh, thank
it's
you. I think it's such a weird thing for me for me to describe, because,
uh-huh.
like you said, it appeals to kids, but it appeals to adults, and it sort of has that wide range. And I didn't. It just kind of evolved that way. But I'll
Mhm.
be selling at a market, and I'll be selling to a mother and her children, and they'll be picking out their favorite animal stickers. And then the next thing I know, I'll have somebody coming over to me, and they'll say, "Oh, I really love that you do animal stickers for adults." And it's it's totally totally perceptional. It completely depends on the person and how you perceive it. But I
Mhm.
love that my art has that sort of wide range, that it appeals to so many people. And it's not just,
Mhm.
art for kids or art for adults. It just kind of encompasses it all, because I think animals are for everyone, and I think wildlife should be, and I think we all should encourage and appreciate that.
Mhm. Yeah, that's fantastic. That's yeah, the perfect answer. You're giving perfect soundbite answers, which I'm like, that's brilliant. That's you've clearly either done this before or are a natural of like soundbite answers. That's like perfect. But it actually leads perfectly onto the next question I was going to ask you, which was kind of like we've talked about how it makes people from young to old happy and it engages them and it makes them kind of think about animals. But there's also thinking behind it in that if they buy and they support you and support kind of what you're doing and are pulled in by the artwork, they are then in turn supporting animals themselves because you donate 10% of your proceeds to animal charities. I think I looked on the website just before we were on the call, and for this month you're donating to the RSPB. And
Yeah.
then, so yes, how did you get this kind of idea to take the business and not just make it kind of a business that sells animal stuff, but also supports animals at the same time? Where did that come from?
So I can't remember exactly who suggested it. I can't remember if it was a family member or if it was a follower on social media, but it was way back in 2018,
Mhm.
and I did this project, and it's called the 100-Day Project, and I decided that I was going to embroider 100 different endangered animals for this project. So it was 100 days, and I was going to embroider a different animal a day. Just the outlines, nothing like fancy, no shadings or anything like that. I was trying to keep it really simple for me.
I was going to
And
say your hands would have been aching by the end of the 100 days if you tried to do all of that.
I remember going to market and like frantically stitching as I was talking to people, because I had to do that day's animal. It was a great icebreaker, and there was a lot of people who were like, "Oh, what animal are you stitching?" And a lot of that. So part of that is I personally learned a lot about endangered animals that I had no idea existed.
Mhm,
And back in 2018, people weren't really talking about animals like pangolins. They were just kind of coming up. I remember that one specifically because I kind of just that was when I fell in love with pangolins. And I
mhm,
remember posting that particular image on social media, and I remember people being like, "Oh my goodness, what is this animal? It's so cute. I love it so
mhm,
much." I know I did in every single caption, I did a little bit about the animal and whether or not it was endangered and why it was endangered and things like that. Just
mhm,
from researching on the internet, trying to glean as much information as I could. And throughout the course of this project, I realized that actually people really love learning about these endangered animals. And
mhm,
again, I can't remember if it was a family member or if it was a follower, but when I said that I was going to sell them, they asked me if I was going to be donating any of the proceeds to wildlife conservation.
mhm,
And I thought to myself, well, that's a great idea. So I decided I was going to donate 20% of every sale from that collection to WWF.
mhm,
And after a couple of months of doing that, once I finally got the collection up online and sales started coming in, I sort of realized that actually I could be doing so much more. I could be donating 10% of all my sales across the board and be
mhm,
making significant contributions to these wildlife organizations. And then, of course, COVID happened.
Mm.
And for these organizations, a lot of the personal donations that they got dried up because people were unsure what their money situation was going to be like, or they were on furlough, or they lost their jobs, and things like that. And so I know from talking to some of the conservation organizations, they were saying like work like mine really helped them to continue on in that sort of really difficult 2020 year,
Mm-hmm.
because they weren't getting as much from their other as much funds from other avenues where they would normally be fundraising, and they couldn't put on like the extravagant events that they normally could and things like that. So it kind of developed into this thing where I went, you know what, I could do some real good with my business here, and decided to go for it.
Mm-hmm.
That was it, really.
It's fantastic, and I think especially with the kind of the kind of twin pronged attack of kind of like you've got the educational aspect in that even if someone doesn't end up buying something, they've still seen the post and they've got the educational value from that. And then if they do go ahead and buy something, if if they're really inspired and they see something they really love, they then got the monetary donation.
Yeah,
And then they also, it's almost, actually I'm wrong, it's almost a three-step thing, because then when they wear the badge or they have the stationery in front of them at a desk and someone asks them what is it, they then do further education. So it's
exactly.
like there's so many levels to what seems like a simple kind of idea of like, oh, we sell things to raise money. There's so many more things going on around that I think make it such a strong idea.
Absolutely, and I think you hit the nail right on the head there. I mean, I had a woman come up to me at a market recently, and I sell a sea angel enamel pin, and she had
mm,
no idea what it was. And I don't say what the animals are on the cards, mostly because then I would have like way too many cards to put all the pins on. So I just explain, as people come up to me, I explain, oh, this is a real animal, and I usually have a Google search up on my phone, sort of ready, so that I can be like, look, this is what it actually looks like, and have that
mm,
conversation. And I remember she was there with a friend, and her friend was trying to decide if she liked penguins or tigers more. And I was having this conversation with this other girl about sea angels, and it was a couple of minutes, if that. And she was, after that conversation, she went, okay, I'm going to buy a pin. And I went, oh, okay, great, fantastic. But now I think to myself, well, if she goes out, she had no idea what that animal was before we had this conversation. She just saw
mm,
it and went, oh, what's that? And I told her what it was. And now she's going to go and she's going to wear it, and people are going to ask her the same question, and she's going to be able to say, oh, it's a sea angel, and
mm,
because I bought this pin, I supported this charity at this time, because I changed the conservation organizations that I fundraised for. I fundraised for one for
mm,
2 months, and then I swapped to a different one. And I have about 12 or 14 charities, which I sort of rotate through,
mm,
just because I don't want to take too many on, because otherwise it doesn't help them as much. I like to be able to go back. So I'll fundraise for like RSPB, and then I'll fundraise for them again in like 6 months' time, because that sort of repeated donations really help with their fundraising, really help with their research, rather. And
mm.
yeah, it's a lovely feeling to know that somebody's out there wearing my pin and might go on to be like, oh, look, by buying this, I helped, save the whales.
That's yeah, it's fantastic. And now you've teed me up to ask, because I feel like the listeners are going to need to know, because there might be someone out there. What is a sea angel? You have
Um,
to.
this is where all your science listeners are going to be like, who is this person? What's going on? Because she has no idea about animals. So a sea angel is a type of a sea slug, basically, which
Mhm,
lives in the deep ocean. And it swims with these like they're like butterfly appendages.
mhm.
Um, and they're just the most beautiful, also slightly horrifying, I won't lie. If you deep dive into the research in them, I'm not going to be held responsible for anything that you may find. But they're just, these most beautiful little creatures. And actually people will probably know them best from Animal Crossing, because they were in the last Animal Crossing game, although they were mislabeled as sea butterflies.
I I didn't even clock that, and I played. I think during lockdown, I'm unashamed to say I've stopped playing it now, and I need to go back because my poor islanders are going to be starving and decrepit, and all
Wondering
their
where you
houses will have
are.
fallen down. They're going to be very upset. But I think I played over about 300 hours of that game within the first few months of lockdown. So, and I did not clock that. So that's actually Animal Crossing. What's going on there? if you're listening,
I'm,
Nintendo.
I'm pretty sure, I'm like 99% sure that they're mislabeled. If they're not mislabeled in the current game, they were definitely mislabeled in a previous game. But yeah, just the
Mhm.
cutest little sort of bioluminescent sea slicks, swimming sea
Mhm.
slicks.
I mean, yeah, and you can always Google like picture, or what I'll do is, listeners, I'll put the links to all of Tash's social media, so you can go and look at her interpretation of a sea angel, and then you can get your kind of see the kind of real thing, and then the artistic interpretation, and then you'll get a full perspective of both science and the art style, and it'll wrap up everything we've been talking about so far. You'll then get a proper idea of everything. No, that's fantastic. And I guess I was about to ask about some of the other. You often pick these kind of stranger animals to kind of do your artwork about. But I think what is maybe good to mention at this point is kind of like, and just to highlight for everyone, is that because what I wanted to kind of bring up a couple of times throughout is that anyone can be involved in art. And what you mentioned in your previous answer really got me thinking about that, in that you don't have to be a really sciencey, heavy science person to be involved in conservation. You can do all of the stuff we've just discussed without necessarily reading thousands of academic papers. You can still raise awareness. You can still kind of do all this sort of conservation work without having to stress about, oh, I've not got a PhD in this, or I've not got a master's in that. You can just use whatever you're good at to put yourself out there and help raise awareness. I think that's fantastic.
Absolutely. And I think that's a great barrier as well to conservation. I think people see conservation and they think of it as like this big job. They think of it like being a web developer. I work in
Mhm,
conservation, like I work in, engineering, or I'm an architect. And they feel
mhm,
like they need to have the qualifications in order to be able to do that. But actually, conservation can be as simple as starting at home and, planting bee friendly flowers and having a pollinator friendly garden, or volunteering. I know that RSPB specifically do have volunteering opportunities,
mhm,
and they look for people who've got different skills, who've got like web skills, so that to help them like collate the data that they gain from their research,
mhm,
or even just going out and selling the pin badges in your
mhm,
local community really really helps them. And it's all these little things that really help these organizations to be able to fund the research which they do. It's not just and like I said, I am probably the furthest away from a sciencey person that you could probably imagine. I'm fairly certain that I failed science in high school. I am not in any way shape or form that way minded. I'm very artistically minded. So
mhm,
but anybody can get involved, and you can get involved from your home, from your office. And I would really encourage everyone to get involved, because we are now at this point in the world where we need to be doing these things and saving the biodiversity that we've lost, to be
mhm,
able to continue, for the human race to just be able to continue on. And I think it's such an important thing. And I see it a lot with parents and small kids, and I think that's fantastic. Getting kids involved in these
mhm.
things where, like, you go to the wetland center and you volunteer and you clean up and things like that. But I find a lot of people stop doing that once they become older. And I feel like, if you've got a weekend, you're free and you've got nothing to do, and you see that your local wetland center or your local park are doing a cleanup, go and help out, because that all helps the bigger picture of conservation.
And that's, yeah. It also, that kind of relates back to one of the other answers you gave when you said about how someone came up and said, "I love how you make animal products for adults." And
Yeah,
it's like, well, really? I mean, all animal things and all nature things are for everyone.
yeah,
Nature is one of few things that doesn't have an age barrier of, like, it's not. There are, of course, there are certain things that are like certain books that are targeted at younger kids, and there's certain things, but nature as a whole and as a concept, it's not like a TV show that's only aimed at adults. Nature is so much more than that. It can be for anyone and everything. And it's, yeah, I think, yeah, we've somehow managed to wrap that up that bring all these ideas in very nicely so far.
helping the world, writing the world, run one beach pickup at a time.
Exactly, exactly. When you do it, even doesn't you don't even have to do it by yourself. Do it with friends. Do it multi-generationally. All these things
And I think
brings people together.
And I think,
Um,
circling back on what you just said about how people think, people do come up to me all the time and go, "Oh my goodness, you make badges, of animals for adults. I never see this. And I
Mhm.
think that's such an important thing. And I mean, I know I'm not the only artist who does animal art and fundraisers for conservation, but
Mhm.
there's not a lot of us, to be honest. And
Mhm.
so, being able to give these people that, I think also it's a little bit of childlike wonder. We all need a little bit of that childlike wonder back in our lives. And what better way to do that than to revisit animals, which, I mean, everyone has a favorite animal. It's like
Mhm.
having a favorite color. Everybody always has a favorite animal. And, I think we should embrace that. I think we should say, yeah, my favorite animal is a manatee, and be proud of that, and, go out and do whatever you can to save the manatees if that's what your favorite animal is, because they need our help.
Yes, exactly, exactly, and it's a good icebreaker, I suppose. What's your favorite animal? Get it out of the way nice and early.
Yeah.
But linking, actually, perfect segue. Linking into my next question, I was going to ask you about what you often create, kind of like unusual animal art about kind of things like the sea angels, pangolins. I think your one of your recent pins was a secretary bird. So
Yeah.
like all of these kind of animals that are brilliant and extremely charismatic once you know about them, but people don't know about them. So you pick these kind of weird things that I think are charming anyway, that people need to know more about. Why is it, what appeals to you about these stranger animals? What makes you want to focus on them a little bit?
I think there's just something about, like you said, they are so charming. And then there's so many animals in the world. I mean, I could draw a different animal every day from the red list, and I would be
Hmm.
drawing for years.
Hmm.
There's so many different animals. And I think people, as we grow older and as we become adults, we sort of forget that there's more to endangered animals than just tigers and, lions and the big cats and whales and things like that. And when I did my 100-day project, when I was learning about endangered animals, I was discovering all these animals that I had no idea even existed. I mean, before
Hmm.
2018, I had no idea what a pangolin was.
Hmm.
And I was considered myself to be quite an animal lover, and I considered myself to be quite savvy in sort of what animals were endangered and were not. And I kind of realized that these animals need a moment in the spotlight too. And you know what? It's a little bit like Pokemon or Animal Crossing. Even though there is like that one Pokemon character or Animal Crossing character that you think nobody talks about them, nobody even knows that they exist,
Hmm.
there is still a fan base for that. There are people who absolutely adore that animal. And when I did the Secretary Bird pin, I had people commenting and going, "Oh my gosh, you do a secretary bird. I love them." And they were so excited because they don't see this kind of art very often. They don't get
Hmm.
secretary bird merch. Whereas, you go to a zoo and they will have tigers plastered on every single thing that you possibly
Hmm.
can. But emus, not so much. And I just feel like they deserve a moment in the spotlight. And they're so incredible. They're such incredible animals. And
Hmm.
I mean, I have a list of unusual animals that I adore,
Hmm.
that I I just think that they need to be. And also, if people don't know that these animals exist, they're not going to want to work towards conserving them.
Hmm.
People want to help those animals that they know about. So people like to help the tigers and they like to save the whales because they know about those animals, because so many
Hmm.
documentaries have been done about them, so many, articles in mainstream media have been made about them, that
Hmm.
they're so well known. But these animals deserve just as much love and they need just as much attention. And some of them are really in danger of becoming extinct very, very soon if we don't do anything about it. And they are, evolutionary completely distinct, like the vaquita dolphin.
Hmm.
And if we don't raise awareness for them, then we're going to lose this incredible animal from the world.
Hmm. That's, yeah, and it's one of those things that it's only when it seems to be people and humans don't realize that something's important until either it's gone or they get shown it.
Yeah.
So we need to make sure go for option number two. We show them everything and go, look what we're poised to lose or not be able to live in a world with and not be able to appreciate. And aside from that, we're going to take away something that inherit has, in my mind, inherently has a right to exist. Like it's mad. It's yeah. And so I think it's nice that you pick these things, especially for people who don't know. A secretary bird is like this. it's hard to describe. It's a long, it's a bird with long legs, almost looks kind of eagle-y, but with long legs and
Yeah,
these feathers
like a
sticking out of
stork.
its head. Yes, it's a bizarre creature. But again, if you're following all of Tash's social media, you'll have seen a picture of her interpretation, and you'll know exactly what it looks like. So go and do that. Um, but no, that's oh
And I think
so.
you're right. No, that's all right. I think you're right that like people need to be shown it, and I think pangolin is a
Mhm,
perfect example of that. Again, back in 2018, I remember researching pangolins when I found out when I was doing this project, and I was going to draw a pangolin and then embroider it, and I was trying to find out more about pangolins, and I was finding a little bit, but I
mhm,
was kind of getting a little bit stuck here and there. And then, sort of towards the later end of that year, I don't know what happened. I think some article must have come out, or a documentary must have come out. But all of a sudden, I started getting sent from my followers all these articles about pangolins. And that's something I love. I get sent, unusual
mhm,
animals from my followers all the time. They see things and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I thought you'd like this," and I'd be like, "Yes, yes, I do."
mhm,
But I think the penguin's a great example in that, like, once people started being shown it, then all of a sudden, all this attention came around how to conserve the penguin. How can we
mhm.
protect them? What can we do? And now, you watch a documentary series about anywhere, where a penguin might be residing, and they will 100% talk about penguins because they know how wonderful and charming they are.
Exactly, exactly. And this is the thing. I started this podcast and named it after an animal that was underappreciated and not many people knew about. And now look at them. They've gone off without me. They've become successful, and I'm left stuck here with a name that they're no. But that's on it. They do still need protection. That was a joke. Please go and do research on pangolins and still support them. They are not doing as well as I was making out there, but they are doing a lot better than you would have expected. I think just a few years ago, given or they're at least doing well in terms of cultural awareness
Yes.
and people knowing what they are.
Yes. Maybe not
Um,
the best media strategy I would have picked, but,
yeah.
for a pangolin, but
Yes, not ideal, but it got them attention.
yes.
But actually, something you brought up there, and I think is another bonus of art and communicating conservation through art, is that kind of when you're talking about looking for articles and looking for information, and something I'm finding more and more is that unless you are signed up to something, a very expensive journal or a very expensive this, it's hard to get access to accurate or or any kind of information easily. So by having art to transfer, art is free to everyone can appreciate a picture on Instagram. Everyone can share a picture on Instagram or do whatever and read a post and do these things. So it's nice to have these ways as long as you're if anyone's thinking about posting about conservation, as long as you're posting accurate things,
Yeah,
I think it's an excellent way of getting information about. And another bonus to doing it in kind of an artwork form is that you've got this image, you've got this information, and it's all free and easily accessible for people to look at.
exactly.
Um, so yes, another bonus. But yes, before I feel like every question, like I've written these questions down and we're talking about them in such depth. I really enjoy it. Like I want to stay on each question for the whole interview, but I'm going to force myself to move on because I feel like this next question could be quite a long one as well. Which is, I wanted to ask about when you're talking about kind of animals and we've talked about kind of you like to focus on the strange. What are some of your other favorite underappreciated strange animals? Maybe you've created art of them, but maybe ones you haven't created art of. What are the ones that stick out in your mind as being underappreciated and that you really, really love?
This is where I'm going to ramble on now, and you're going to be like, "Okay, enough."
I'll just leave you talking. I'm gonna go and do
Come
my
back in
washing
an hour.
downstairs.
Come
Yeah.
back in an hour, Jack. I'll still be going.
Yep.
Um, Gosh, where do I begin? Australian animals. I mean, obviously, I have
Mhm,
family in Australia, so I have a particular love and appreciation for them. But I love Tasmanian devils, the cutest
mhm,
little things with the sweetest. I have this weakness for anything that's got like a bit of a wiggly nose. Any like
mhm,
marsupial or mammal that has a bit of like a twitchy nose, I will stare at it for hours on end.
mhm,
But Tasmanian devils are one of my favorites. I love Goodfellas tree kangaroos. I think they're
mhm,
amazing. And I saw one, actually. I saw my first one in Chester Zoo, and I remember being there, and I think it was quite recently after they had just gotten it, or it had just had a baby. Something had happened. I think it was quite recently after they had just gotten it, a few years back. And this woman behind me was also walking to the same enclosure, and she was saying to her friend, "Oh, this is a new exhibit." And she was really excited to see the tree kangaroos,
mhm,
because she had seen them on of course, their very famous TV show. So yeah, I anything. I mean, platypus. I particularly love anything that looks like it should be really like sweet and harmless, but actually is like venomous or has something that's like you would not expect from it. So I really love quolls, for example. They're an Australian marsupial. They're carnivorous, but you look at them and they look so adorable. These little like spotty things with these little faces that they're a little bit like a cross between a wallaby and a quokka, and
Okay.
and just like the and a Tasmanian devil. If you imagine the three of them all kind of came together and made a quoll,
Hmm.
and they look so cute and so adorable, but are extremely dangerous. And solenodons, which I'm sure I've butchered the name of completely, but they are, I actually discovered them through a David Attenborough article about animals that he would keep on his ark, like his 10 favorite animals that he'd keep on his ark. And they are amazing. There are these little like shrew-like animals that are found in, I think, Haiti and Cuba, and they're venomous, but they again look so innocent and sweet until you just discover that actually if they bite you, you're going to be in a lot of serious trouble.
Yep.
But yeah, I really could. I actually do have a list in front of me, and I really could just go on for days. I mean, tamarins, love tamarins, love a little
Yes.
monkey.
Hmm.
I got to see some jumping around having lunch at a zoo just before everything happened with COVID, and just was absolutely enthralled with them. They were jumping through the trees and
Hmm.
so adorable. I love red river hogs. I think a lot of these animals, you can actually
Hmm.
see a lot of them in zoos, but they tend to get overlooked for things like the tigers or the penguins or the giraffes or the elephants. And don't get me wrong, I love all those animals as well.
Hmm.
Happily draw tigers for the rest of my life if if it came
Hmm.
down to it. But people sort of see a red river hog and they think, oh, it's just a pig. And it's like, oh, but it's so much more than that.
Hmm.
They're so incredibly intelligent and amazing and just incredible little animals. Um, yeah, I'm going to stop there because otherwise I really am going to go
I mean, I'm
forever.
loving hearing about it. No, because I agree. Like, there are these things that like you walk past in a zoo and you think, oh, there's a monkey, and people just call it a monkey. They never bother to learn its name. They never bother to learn the type because they're just like, oh, it's a monkey. That's cute. Whatever. Move
Yeah,
on. But there's so much to stand. If you watch each of these animals, if you watch the air quotes monkey, you watch the air quotes pig. There's so much personality and character and so much to love about them, so much interesting information to learn from them, so much kind of yeah, so much conservation value. Some of the animals that you think are kind of maybe boring, or maybe you're not excited by, or maybe just a glance as you pass by them, or you're not excited. They're actually some of the ones that I think are the most exciting and interesting, and you should really focus on. Because
exactly.
and if you go to the zoo before this wave hits everyone that all these animals are cool, they're the animals you get the best view of, and you get to spend like everyone will crowd around a tiger exhibit to try and see the tiger. But if you get some one-on-one time because no one's looking at red river hogs and you just stood there peacefully looking at these things, it's some of the best experiences you're ever going to get because you're like, this is like you get this moment to connect with this strange little pig uh, creature that's just completely charming. It's yeah, yeah, and I like the Australia representation because it's a continent we've not really touched on the podcast before because we had an interview recently with Deborah Tabart of the Australian Koala Foundation, and she told us all about those. And yeah, there's all sorts of incredible, charismatic animals there, but the weirder little things we've not really touched on. So it was nice to know your favorites. I think, yeah, Tasmanian devils are a favorite. We've recently been watching Crikey, It's the Irwins, and
Love
I
them.
just it's made me fall in love with Tasmanian devils because they just seem a bit mental, but also very cute. And I'm like, yes, that's exactly the energy that I like to see in my animals. Just slightly chaotic, but also fantastic.
Pure
Um,
chaos, pure chaos. I had the great fortune recently. Well, I keep saying recently because it feels so recent, but of course it was 2019 before everything happened. But I went to Australia
mhm,
with my husband to go visit my family, and we went to one of the zoos there, one of the smaller ones, and they had Tasmanian devils, and they were sleeping. And we kind of looked at them for a little while, and I thought maybe they'll wake up, and they were like, no, they're definitely sleeping, they're not going to go. And I said, okay, we'll circle back around later and see whether or not they're a little bit more active. And as soon as we walked away, I saw the keeper coming towards us. And it turns out that it was just about to be their feeding time.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as the keeper was like, they could hear the bowl, these little critters like jumped up. It was almost like they had been fake sleeping because they didn't want to be disturbed by the public.
Yeah.
And they were just waiting for their lunch. And got up and sort of came up to the edge of the enclosure so that we could see them, and were like looking up at us. And I just remember looking down at this little Tasmanian devil who was looking up at me, desperately hoping that I was going to feed it something. But of course I wasn't about to. And it was just one of the most incredible animal experiences I've had in such a long time. You know, this seeing them interacting and seeing them running around, and they are pure balls of chaos.
Yeah.
But so charming and lovely, and again, so underrepresented. But I'm sure that so many of your listeners will go, oh yeah, I've heard of a Tasmanian devil.
Mm-hmm.
It's just one of those animals that you don't automatically think of when you get asked what your favorite animal is. You know, it's always kind of the big five, I would say, you know, whales, tigers, giraffes, elephants, you know, and these little creatures, which deserve just as much love, you know, we know about, but because they're not in our consciousness and not shown to us on a regular basis, we forget that they exist. And I think that's a real shame.
Mm. And I think that's actually, that last point that you made is reminding me of two things that I wanted that I can bring up. Is that the interesting thing about Tasmanian devils as well is that they're everyone can think of them, but they can't, like, they know the name, but they don't know what they. If you were to describe a Tasmanian devil to me, a number of people would probably just be like, no idea,
Yeah.
not even know where to start. But if you look them up, they're so interesting. And there is, for the sciencey focused people who are interested in kind of like really complicated scientific issues and to do with conservation, they have really interesting conservation issues and problems that need to be solved. So things like, I remember reading somewhere recently that there was an issue where they were having all of like these outbreaks of growths on their faces, like within the population, and so they had to breed, and it like a closed kind of group away from the ones that were getting these growths to try and repopulate areas where with Tasmanian devils that didn't have these strange kind of cancerous lumps on their faces.
Yeah.
So there's always this, we have this base level appreciation of like they're chaotic and cute, but also there's these interesting stories there that you can delve into and learn so much from. And I need to look that up actually, because it's one of those things that I read it a while ago, and now I'm kind of like, I didn't get the end to that story, and I'd like to go with conservation. I don't think there's ever really an end, but I'd like to know the next chapter of that story and how that project's developing, because it's interesting with these things. It just goes to prove everyone that you need to go and look up things and keep track of them. And the other thing that it brought up with you talking about them all running towards the fence is that I feel like you need to do an entire range of cassowary art, because the number of times I've been walking through Edinburgh Zoo and a cassowary has run at a fence at me, like thinking I have food because I've got like a Edinburgh Zoo colored top on or whatever it is. I'm like, and it's terrifying, but I love them. So that would be, if while we're talking about things running towards fences, it's reminded me. My pitch to you would be an entire range of cassowary
I,
pieces, and
I
also Australian, that area. There you go. So
a whole section, a whole that's my next 2 years of product
yeah.
launches sorted. I actually do have a cassowary sticker,
Do
which is
you?
going to be coming out. I'm just waiting for it to be shipped to me. So once it comes out, I will let you know, and I will send you one. But I love cassowaries.
Mhm.
I have such a special place in my heart for them. Actually, one of the greatest regrets that I have is that for my honeymoon, my husband and I went to Australia. And we went to the Great Barrier Reef. So we did all the snorkeling, and we saw humpback whales, and we saw turtles, and we saw all this amazing sea life, and it was fantastic. And we specifically went to this one area in Australia where you can either go you sort of turn left to go to the ocean, or you turn right to go to the rainforest. And we had an opportunity to go and look for cassowaries in the rainforest, and I didn't take up the opportunity, and I regret it with every fiber of my being. Because they are one of my favorite birds of all time. I love a a bit of an unusual bird. I love a secretary bird. I love a cassowary. I just think that they're fantastic.
Mm-hmm. I think, yeah, I need, because I keep bringing them up on the show because I'm like, anyone who briefly mentions anything to do with roughly anything that could be associated with a cassowary, I'm like, let's talk about them because I think they might be in the running from like, because there's all these little birds that are very dainty and fly around and do all these, they're very pretty and they make beautiful songs. But the real star, in my mind, of the show, I think the cassowary is either the second heaviest bird after an ostrich. It's huge. They're fantastic. They're blue and red. They have like these big, massive. They're just incredible. And so yes, any opportunity to bring them up, I'm getting in there. And yes, I actually, this is the thing. I'm gonna be as soon as those stickers go up, I'm gonna be ordering one because I've actually been waiting to place an order with you because I've just gotten a new laptop, and so I've been waiting because I had all my stickers on my old case, and now I have had to, because it's a new laptop, new case. I'm like, I got a plain black case so I can cover it with all sorts of weird and wonderful animals. So I've been waiting, but now is the time. Now is the time.
Give
As soon
me
as they're up.
give me a couple of weeks, and I'll give you a shout once they're ready. But you talking
Perfect.
about that's just made me realize as well. Actually, I have this massive affinity for birds with like long stomping feet because secretary birds, cassowaries. I love an emu. I think one of my favorite Australia stories is the Emu Wars, which happened way back. And oh my goodness, do you not know about the Emu
I
Wars?
don't know about the Emu Wars.
This is a complete segue from anything that has to do with anything. But it's one of my favorite stories of all time. It was back when they were settling Australia, when the Europeans had gone over to go and settle Australia, and they had gone over to Western Australia, and they were trying to grow crops, but they were finding that the emus were eating all their crops before they could grow them.
Uh-huh.
So the kind of new mayor of this town, who I believe was either British or American, I can't remember, he wrote to the government and said he wanted to buy some guns because he had been in the army, and he said, I want to shoot some emus so that we can grow these crops because otherwise we're all going to die out here. And the government at that time, back in the 1700s or whenever it was, said, yeah, sure, and they sent them some guns. And the people of this town waged war on the emus, and they went after them. And there were a few casualties on both sides, I would like to add. The emus put up a good fight for themselves, but the people couldn't reload the guns fast enough, and so they just kind of got pecked and trampled to death. And in the end, the emus actually won. The humans had to back off and say, actually, this is emu territory, and we're gonna let you do what it is that you need to do, and we're gonna go and plant our crop somewhere else.
And that was a smart choice because yes, there's something about a big bird that like you'd think, oh, it's just a ditzy, oh, it's whatever it is, because you get bird brains and all these phrases that are associated with whatever it is, and then paints them in one way. But I would not, no, and especially I was just googling while you were telling that story. I was listening, but I was also googling because you were telling, like, you'd reminded me of another species that I the extinct, the moa, the
Yeah.
massive like bird with these massive, like, I saw, the reason it came into my head is because we were talking about these stompy birds. Like, I went to the museum recently, over in Edinburgh, and they have a skeleton, and it's the biggest feet aside from like on a skeleton of a dinosaur I think I've ever seen. Like, they're fantastic. So there's another animal for everyone to look up that they won't know whatever it is. And if you ever do an extinct animals range, the moa there is number one.
Oh, right up there, right up there.
No, that's fantastic. I think that's a perfectly relevant diversion from what we were going to talk about, because I feel like any excuse to bring up weird, wonderful birds is, we should take it.
Absolutely.
But no, that's fantastic. So yeah, and it kind of, I guess, leads nicely on to my last question. It's less of a smooth segue, but I'm going to say it's a good segue. Which is, I can't believe it. We're getting towards the end, towards the last kind of couple questions, and I always like to ask, if you have a piece of advice for someone. We've kind of talked passionately about art. We've talked passionately about strange animals. We've talked passionately about specifically big stompy birds. But if you had a piece of advice that you wanted someone to take away from all of that chaotic up and down, whatever we were talking about, what would your advice be to someone who has maybe listened to this and is feeling inspired by any of these conversations? What would you want them to take away?
I think what I'd love for people to take away from this is that anyone can get into conservation. And it's important for all of us to get into conservation. And again, like I said, I'm not sciencey. I did not study any of this at school or university or anything like that. But to be able to make a difference is such a wonderful feeling. And you can do that by supporting your local botanical gardens or your local parks or your local wetland centers. They all feed into this bigger picture of conservation, and they all make an impact. And I think one of the great shames of living here in the UK is that I don't feel like people here really appreciate the local animals and the local biodiversity that's available here. And I feel like that needs to change. We need to appreciate and love. And that's very much me coming from the Australian perspective, because Australians love their animals. They love their wild, wacky, bizarre looking animals that shouldn't make sense but still do, and they will talk about them forever. And I feel like we need to bring some of that into the UK as well. So find an animal. If it's one particular animal, if you're really passionate about badgers or water voles, or I think they just reintroduced bison into the UK, which is incredible. Go and see what you can do to help them, and you'd be surprised at actually how many skills will be transferable, and how many ways in which you can help, even if it's you standing there selling pin badges a couple of times a week at the train stations in London. All of it makes a difference.
Yeah, exactly. It's fantastic, and it's such good advice. And yeah, if you're good at art, get involved in art. If you're good at kind of chatting, I feel like I'm good at chatting to people, do some talking, spread your word that way. And it's something that I feel like, if you haven't listened to previous episodes, listeners, some of them, like even the science side sometimes says that they struggle. Like, I've talked to the leading scientists in their field, and they've been like, we can do all the research, but we need people who can do the communication side. So use your passions and use whatever it is you're good at in creative or clever or whatever ways. And my day job is working for a botanic garden, but within the botanic garden, I do learning technology. So I use my knowledge of cameras and filmmaking and editing and website design and website management and stuff like that. So you can really use any skill set to get involved. And I think that's fantastic advice. I guess that's a perfect note to start wrapping up on. But the final thing, obviously, I want to ask, and especially in your case, I feel like we talked about some of the products throughout, but if people are interested, we kind of dropped hints about pins and stickers and stationery and stuff. But what can people do to kind of support you and therefore support charity? What kind of products can they get from you? Where can they get them? This is the self-promo time. So talk about whatever you want to talk about to the people.
This is the self-promo time. So I have my own online website, which is hatchlingmakes.com. You can also find me on Etsy. I've got a limited product line there. I also do a lot of markets. So if you are in London, and I have a list on my website, a little events page where you can come and see and meet me in person, and we will talk about Big Stompy Birds. I will probably never let you leave the table. But I sell enamel pins, and I sell vinyl stickers, which are PVC free, so they're a little bit more environmentally friendly. And I try and keep everything as environmentally friendly as I possibly can, and also keep everything I try and create things which are going to be lasting and cherished and passed down through the ages. That's my goal. I don't want anything to be thrown away after a couple of years or anything like that. So enamel pins, I do button badges, I do vinyl stickers, I do sticker sheets, I do washi tape, I do a whole range of various stationery things. And you can find me on Instagram. That's where I am most of the time, or on TikTok if you are more video inclined, or on Twitter, which I sadly neglect a lot of the time, but if you DM me on there, I will absolutely see it and respond to you.
That's perfect. And I'll put links to all of those in the description for this episode. So if you haven't looked already while we've been chatting, go and look now, go and follow, go and support, go and maybe buy, even if you're not buying for yourself, treat someone else in your life to a sticker or a badge or whatever it is. If you've got birthdays coming up or whatever, treat yourself or someone else to these things. And yeah, you are supporting conservation. You've supported a very long conversation by listening to this. You're supporting conservation by doing that as well. So yes, the links for all of that will be in the description for the episode. And yes, the links while you're down there for all of my social media, the podcast social media, everything will be down there as well. We're at Pangolin Podcast on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. We're on LinkedIn. We're on pretty much anywhere you can like or follow or do whatever. Search for us, you'll probably find us. Also, you can subscribe if you feel like it on your podcast streaming service of choice. We're on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music now, I think. We're everywhere. So just like subscribe so you don't miss out on any future episodes. And if you're feeling very, very kind, you could leave us a review. I'm not going to tell you what to do, but if you left us a 5-star review, I would love you forever and ever. So if you could do that, that would be very much appreciated as well. And yes, I guess that brings us to the end. So I guess all I have to say really is thank you, listeners, so much for listening and supporting the show, and for supporting if they've come from your end, Tash, so for supporting Tash as well. And of course, thank you so much, Tash, for your time and for your insights and for talking about big stompy birds with me, and art and all sorts of fantastic things. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I'm going to have to make a pin of that now, aren't I? Big Stompy Birds fan club.
Yes. Well, I have noticed on your website you've got gifts for like dolphin lovers or whale lovers or whatever. So you pins for or gifts for big stompy bird lovers, and then that's perfect. So yes, on that note, before we ramble even more about these amazing animals, thank you everyone, and until next time, goodbye.